everyone, and welcome to a new year of monthly reads. So as it's a new year, I have brand new books. So a few years ago I read a series called Chronicles of the Necromancer. I really enjoyed it, so I put the sequel series onto my wish list, and I got bought the two books in that series for Christmas. So I decided it's January, I'll read those, so let's get on with the review. Okay, now if you haven't read any of Chronicles of the Necromancer or The Sworn or The Dread, which you kind of need to have read the Chronicles of the Necromancer before reading those, just because a lot of the characters and the plot points that they discuss are things that happened in the other novels, so you kind of have to have that reference of what happened. The main character of the story is Triss, who is a prince, and basically his older brother decides he's not waiting for the throne any longer and sort of has a military coup, takes over, murders half the family. Triss escapes and ends up bumping into a band of travelling sort of smugglers, mercenaries, all sorts of people that aren't particularly brilliant, but they end up helping him, and he meets the princess that was betrothed to his older brother, and they all go on this quest to sort of hide out from his brother and then sort of raise an army and go and defeat his brother and take back the crown. So that's the basic story. But along the way, Triss, who's always been able to see ghosts, learns that that's because he's a really powerful summoner and he can control the spirits of the dead and has all sorts of amazing powers, but he doesn't know how to use them. So there's a whole plot point about him using those, and so here's where it gets a little bit spoilery. Triss obviously wins back the throne, becomes this super powerful summoner who can communicate with the dead, and he marries the princess that was supposed to marry his older brother, and they sort of live happily ever after. Or maybe not, because basically they have this whole issue with there being joint thrones. They don't like the fact that he's married this princess from another kingdom that is the sole heir to her throne. And there's all sorts of political stuff that happens once the kingdoms are settling back down again. And that's really what the second two books in the Chronicles of the Necromancer focus on. They focus on that war of sort of politics. Also, the effects of Triss's brother's coup caused a lot of problems with the magic that is there, because he had this mage helping him out, and he was a dark mage that sort of got involved with blood magic, and that's like a forbidden thing, and he was causing all these problems as well. So Triss has to try and set the magic right in the kingdom as well. So there's a lot of stuff that happens in the Chronicles of the Necromancer. Now, the first book of Fallen King's cycle is The Sworn, and that basically focuses on all the mundane things that are happening. Triss is waiting for his child to be born. There's sort of a smuggling operation going on with these vampires that one of his friends is dealing with. And there's just generally picking up the pieces of what happened in the last lot of books. But on top of all this, there are these people called the Sworn, and they protect the burial mounds. And they've been reporting that these black-robed figures have been desecrating the burial mounds, and they're trying to awaken whatever's asleep in these burial mounds. And on top of that, they think that some of the people that were causing the political problems in the last lot of books, they're going to come back with an army, but they don't know when this is going to happen, why this is going to happen, who's fully behind it. So there's all these little mysteries, and while this is going on, there's just like Triss is waiting for his child to be born. But there's also a lot of risk involved with that, because Kiara was injured while she was pregnant, so they don't know how that's going to affect the baby. And there's all these ifs and buts that they're concerned about. So it really starts off at quite a nice slow pace, and there's a lot of getting to know the characters again and catching you up on the things that have happened. But it doesn't seem to bog down the plot, which is quite nice. There are also little reminders partway through when it suddenly felt you needed to be reminded of this thing that happened quite a while back and it was relevant to what's going on. So I felt that was quite nice. The characters all felt like they were the same characters, but you could tell that they'd matured and changed, but this felt like it was very natural, and I did really enjoy that natural change. There were some new characters introduced as well, which was nice, and we had the sort of the mystery of their backstory. We didn't fully know who they were or what was going on with them, so it sort of meant that everything wasn't sort of just plodding on with the same characters. The pace of the novel changed quite a bit because it depended on which character it was focused on in that chapter, and this sort of gave it this nice flow in the pace because you had some characters that were in a really fast-paced environment where they were sort of running for their life, and then you had these other characters that were just sort of sitting there waiting for something to happen, and they were just sort of waiting for the storm to break kind of thing, and they weren't really doing much, but it really gave you that sort of sense of something building to this much bigger plot, so that was really nice. My biggest concern with the pace though was the fact that it felt very much like this was going to be a trilogy rather than just a two-part series, and I felt like they're going to have a lot to cover in the next book, and I'm just not sure if they can do it because they've gone at this such slow pace, building everything up, reminding us of the characters, creating the stakes, and leaving us with lots of mysteries and questions to be answered, which is what you expect from a really good fantasy novel, and that's what this is. It was a really enjoyable, fun fantasy novel. One thing to be aware of, this copy didn't actually have a map in it, so if I wanted to see where places were, I had to refer to the older books that I had to see the map, and it also didn't have a names and places, which the second book, The Dread, did have. Okay, so as soon as I had read The Sworn, I decided I would then go on and read The Dread, as I had both books. And in The Dread, it was all the war. This huge war had broken out and it focused entirely on just that war. But one of the issues that I had is that we didn't have all the information, and it felt very sudden. That it started very slow, like everybody knew there was going to be a war, but nobody was quite sure what was going to happen, and then suddenly, bam, next thing you know, they're all on the front line, fighting this war like they've been there forever. And it's like, okay, that feels a little bit too quick. The pace was very backwards and forwards, and it didn't have that natural flow of one character with urgency and one character with sort of just going about normal things. It had this sort of sudden like, right, we need to skip loads of stuff now because we haven't got the time to hang around and explain how this happened and that happened. We're just going to go at like 100 miles an hour. And then suddenly when they needed something to be really in detailed and explaining this minute thing that happened over 5 minutes, it would really slow down. And it just sort of kind of gave you whiplash with the pace a little bit. It definitely felt like there should have been more in this novel, especially a couple of times where things happened and you just felt like you needed an explanation to why that happened. It's like at one point, one of the characters in the first novel had to go through this real rigmarole to sort of find this information out and risk their life. And then in the second novel, this character was there and he was just like, oh yeah, I'm a vampire and I was alive at the time that was happening and I knew all this happening, and it sounded like they could have just asked you. And I feel like there should have been some explanation as to why that wasn't just done, because it kind of just felt a little bit odd. He was just like, the guy risked his life for the information, yet there was a vampire there that knew all this. And that meant it just sort of, it took you out of it a little bit. And I don't like it when you sort of get that, because I literally had to sort of sit there and go, okay, why did they not just ask? And it really sort of threw me out of the story, and that took away some of the enjoyment for me. I didn't dislike this novel on the whole. I did actually enjoy it, you know, the battles were very well detailed and a lot of fun things happened. I just felt like there were bits missing and questions that I wanted answered that weren't even explored because it was like, we don't have the time to explore that. And I think this is an issue I've been having with a lot of modern fantasy that I've read over the past few years. A series has really built up to be really good, and then you get to the last novel and they've just had to pack so much information in that it just feels rushed. Like, it doesn't feel like a satisfying ending because it's literally just skipped huge bits to get to the interesting bits. And sometimes the slow, boring bits actually are what make the end novels quite fun. That sort of mundanity where they're trying to piece together something while there's these huge things going on. And it just feels like a lot of modern fantasy novels are missing that. Or at least the ones I've read are missing it anyway. Overall, it was a fun series to read, and it was nice to be able to read the further stories of these characters and where they've been and where they might be going in future. And I did enjoy that. As well, if you like just a good fun fantasy book, it is that. It is a really fun modern fantasy book. You know, it's got really good world building, especially if you read the earlier series. You know, it does all the world building for you then, and explaining the system of its religion, the different kingdoms, and how magic works. It has a nice magic system, you know, it's detailed enough for you to sort of go, okay, this is how the magic works, but it doesn't bog you down. You know, sometimes some magic systems are just far too complicated in novels and they just really bog you down, and you're spending too much time thinking, okay, how does the magic work, as opposed to just enjoying the fact that they're like, oh, they're using magic now, and that's fun. But overall, yeah, I would recommend this to anybody that wants to read fantasy. However, just be aware it does have that sort of little awkward bit where it sort of feels like there's just too much rammed into the last novel. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video and I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you so much for watching, and please like and subscribe and comment. Let me know what you think about these books if you've read them, and also give me recommendations for fantasy novels. I love fantasy novels. I already have so many fantasy novels that I should read, but I'm always welcome to more suggestions. So yeah, just let me know in the comments. Thank you so much. Bye!